Hi everybody, welcome back to Dave's Math channel. This is my continuing feature on the Math Lovers book, 3-volume series I wrote from 2019 to 2022 that's available on Amazon.com, both in Kindle and in paperback format in case you're interested in purchasing any one of these volumes or the whole set. Um, anyway, just a little plug for my book. And this is my continuing feature on the Math Lovers book. I'm up to section 8.4, which is on sequential programming, and I've been talking about loops the last couple of videos. This is my third video on loops, and today I'm going to talk about while and do while loops. I've already talked about if then loops and for loops, and today while and do while loops. Anyway, let's begin. So, what's a while loop? Well, while loop's kind of like a for loop. Remember, a for loop, you have a index that changes, usually increases from I min to I max. Well, here you don't have an index; you just have a condition. So the condition is just some condition on the variables in your program, and the variables are going to change. Hopefully, if they don't, then you'll never get out of the while loop. But you want to keep running this code as long as the condition is satisfied, as long as the condition's true. And anyway, I'll give you some examples. And a lot of times it's useful to use while loops rather than for loops. We'll see why in a minute. But anyway, so I think it's worthwhile just jumping into some examples here. So the first example, I'm asking you to write code with a while loop to list the integers from 1 to 10. We did this with a for loop last time. It's pretty easy with a for loop, but you can also do it with a while loop. So remember with the for loop, we had a index which we called I, which we let range from 1 to 10, and we're just printing I within the for loop. Well, it's a little more complicated. You can do the same thing with a while loop, but instead you have to initialize your variable outside the loop. So you're initializing I to equal 1. That's your first statement in your program. And now you're just going through the while loop as long as I is less than or equal to 10. So now what you're doing is you're printing I like we did for the for loop, but now we have to increase the value of I within the loop. So that's the only difference. Pretty much, another very simple program. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on your preference whether you want to write a program like this using a for loop or using a while loop. But anyway, here's a case where you can do it either way. But there are other cases where it's advantageous to use while loops. And this next example is a case in point. This is a more complicated example. Um, for this one, we're calculating the average of a bunch of test scores. So this might be a program the teacher might use to find what the average scores on the exams are for one of her students. So how do we do this? Well, she's got a list of scores for each student, so she just keeps inputting them. And as long as the score is not equal to -1, this value of -1 is what we call a sentinel. It's just a indication for to get out of the while loop. It's kind of a code to tell the computer to stop reading in the test scores. So what does she do? I mean, so we initialize the score to 0. You always want to initialize your value. So we have a bunch of variables in this program. We have one called score, and then we have a variable called n, which is the number of students' scores that she's read, and then we have a sum. So the way we're going to do this is we're gonna sum up all the scores of all the students. Each time she enters a score, we just add that number to sum. That'll give you the sum of all the scores, all the test scores. And we're also keeping track of the number of students as we go through the loop. And when she enters a -1, we're going to stop incrementing both n and sum, and we're going to divide sum by n and call that the average. And notice that I've called that a float. So remember, we always talk about types of variables. This is very close to C. In C, there's int variables and there's float variables. So float's going to be an average, and float doesn't have to be an integer. I mean, if we wanted, we could round it to the nearest integer, but we don't have to do that. We can just divide the sum by n, and that'll give you the average once you're done. So that's what this code does. I mean, if you look inside the loop here, here's where the loop starts. While score is not equal to -1. So we're going to keep going through this while loop until the teacher enters -1. That'll be when she's done entering all the scores. So it's going to input the score, and then she's going to enter the score of a given student, and it's going to add the score to the sum. The sum started out as 0, so now sum is getting increased each time the teacher enters a score, and n is also getting increased. It's getting increased by 1 each time. So, but when she's done, after she enters the last score, n will be the number of students, and sum will be the totals of all the students' scores. And then the last thing we have to do once we get out of the loop, she'll enter -1. That'll tell the code to get out of the loop. And then once we're out of the loop, it'll run the code below. It'll say average is sum divided by n, and I'm casting this to a float. The thing that says float in parentheses just means cast the result to a float. And then it's going to say the average score is average, whatever the average is. That's how this thing works. So that's kind of a good, useful, practical example of when might want to use a while loop. And I think I just explained this here. I already explained it, so I don't have to go through this slide. But and then there's another similar type of loop to while loops. They're called do while loops. And the only difference between a while and a do while loop is that with a do while loop, you check your condition at the end of each pass through the loop instead of the beginning. And what that means is you're going to run this code at least once, because do sort of tells the code do this stuff inside the parentheses. But it's going to keep doing it, and it's going to keep checking the condition after each time it runs a loop, and it's going to stop once the condition isn't satisfied anymore. It'll check that at the end of the last run. So the last run, the condition won't be satisfied anymore, but then it won't run anymore. So it's just kind of the order that's different. But the advantage of this is that you always run this at least once. A while loop you may never run. If your condition wasn't satisfied the first time around, it'll just skip the loop completely. But this one will get run at least once. And I think there are cases where wouldn't say one of these is better than the other. There's cases where it's advantageous to use while loops, and there's other cases where it's advantageous to use do while loops. I think it just kind of depends on what you're doing. Anyway, I'm going to give one final example of where we're using a do while loop. So this code will repeat the phrase "hello world" 6 times. And how do we do that? Well, I'm doing it with a do while loop here. So again, we have a sentinel, which I'm calling I. So we initialize I to 0, and then we're going to go through this do while loop as long as I is less than or equal to 5. So what is this code going to do? Well, first time it goes through the loop, I is initially equal to 0, because that's how we initialized it. It's going to write hello world. Then it's going to increase I by 1, so now I is going to be 1. It'll check the value of I. Is I less than 5? Yes it is. I mean, yeah. 1 is less than 5, so it goes back through the loop. It does it again. It prints hello world, and then it's going to increase I by 1 again. Now I is 2. 2 is still less than 5. Notice that the value of I at the end of each run through the loop is the number of times it's written hello. So, the second time I is 2, the third time I is 3, fourth time I is 4, the fifth time, after the fifth time, I is 5, it's still less than or equal to 5, so it'll do it one more time. And by the time it finishes, I is going to be 6, and 6 is no longer less than or equal to 5, so it won't do it anymore. So notice that it did it one more time than I max. So you have to be a little bit careful. You have to kind of be careful the way you count things when you're using while or do while. loops. It usually does things one more time than you would expect if you're using a do while loop. This is a while loop, it would only do it 5 times. But anyway, that's while and do while loops. So thank you for watching. Long live math, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.